Good morning, everybody. We're going to call this meeting to order. The time is 9 a.m. Today is Wednesday, August 24th, 2016. This is day one of the Physical Therapy Board of California. We are meeting in the Department of Consumer Affairs hearing room located at 2005 Evergreen Street in Sacramento. Could we please have roll call?
Katarina Ellaby,
Present.
Alicia Ben-Amin,
Here.
Deborah Alviso,
Here.
Jesus Dominguez,
Present.
Daniel Drummer,
Here.
Tanya McMillian,
Here.
TJ Watkins.
Yeah.
All members are present and the board has a quorum.
Thank you, Brooke. This morning, we have a special order of business, which is a hearing for a petition for termination of probation, as well as a petition for reinstatement of license. At this time, I will turn the proceedings over to Administrative Law Judge Karen Brandt.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Before we go on the hearing record, let's have the parties come before us. Do we have the petitioner for early termination of probation? If you would come forward, and would you do me a huge favor and pronounce your last name, please?
It's pronounced Jehoviak.
Jehoviak. And do we also have our petitioner for reinstatement here? Is Mr. Walker here? Mr. Walker will take you second. But before we go on our hearing record, I just want to discuss a little bit with the board and with the petitioners in this case how this proceeding will go. The way it will work is when we do go on the hearing record, I will ask all the board members to identify themselves so we have, once again, an establishment of the quorum. Then I will have Mr. Tan do a presentation of the petition. He will present the petition package, and he will do a little presentation. Then, Mr. Jehoviak, I will swear you in, and I will allow you to make your presentation. What the board is most interested in hearing about is rehabilitation. And then, Mr. Tan, after you have made your presentation, will have an opportunity to ask you questions. Then all of the board members will ask you questions as well. And when everybody has asked all their questions, I will allow each of you, Mr. Tan and Mr. Jehoviak, to do a summing up, and then we will take this matter under submission. The board will not be issuing a decision today, but a decision will come in the mail sometime in the future. Any questions? And when I say in a moment that we're going on the hearing record, what I mean is our court reporter will start taking down every word. When our court reporter starts taking down every word, you have to speak very loudly and clearly.
Okay.
All right? Ready to go on our hearing record? We are on the record before the Physical Therapy Board of California for two petition hearings. We will take these petition hearings in the order they are listed on the agenda. The first one will be the petition for early termination of probation by Jeffrey Daniel Jehoviak, OAH number 2016-070392. The second one will be the petition for reinstatement by James Dale Walker, Jr., OAH number 2016-070390. My name is Karen Brandt. I'm the administrative law judge who has been assigned to preside over these matters. In order to ensure that we have a quorum, I am going to ask each member of the board to identify themselves, starting first with our member to the furthest right.
Alicia Rabina Amen.
Katarina Ellaby.
Jesus Dominguez.
Daniel Drummer.
Tanya McMillan.
TJ Watkins.
Deborah Alviso.
We have a quorum. May I please have the appearance of the Deputy Attorney General?
For the Attorney General's office, Jansen Tan.
And we have Mr. Jehoviak, our petitioner, here today.
Good morning.
Good morning, and you will be representing yourself.
I will.
Before we went on the record, I described the procedures in this matter. As I explained, Mr. Tan will go first and present the petition package. Then you will have an opportunity to present your case. Do you have any questions before
No.
we begin? You understand the procedures?
I do.
Mr. Tan, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, members of the board, Your Honor, members of the public. I'm appearing on behalf of the Attorney General pursuant to Government Code Section 11522. I'm here to assist the board in fact-finding. My role is not adversarial, but is intended to protect the public interest. I'm here to ensure that the board has adequate information from which to make a decision on whether to grant this petition. I'd like the board to first turn to the exhibit binder before you, and I'd like to point out the relevant statutes and regulations contained in the before you today that point to the rehabilitation criteria for denial and reinstatement of licensure. It's Title 16 CCNR 1399.21. That is on Exhibit 6. It states that the board, in evaluating the rehabilitation, shall consider the following. And I'll pause briefly until you find the exhibit. Number one criteria is the nature and severity of the crime under consideration. In this case, I believe it is a DUI case. The evidence of any acts or crimes committed subsequent to the act or crime, the time that has elapsed since the commission of the act or crime, and the extent to which the applicant has complied with the terms of parole, probation, or any other sanctions imposed on the applicant. And last but not the least is the evidence, if any, of rehabilitation by the applicant. 16 CCNR 1399.22, point 22, rehabilitation criteria for suspensions and revocations is also instructive and uses substantially the same criteria: the nature and severity of the crime, the evidence of any acts committed subsequent to the act, and so on. Your Honor, I'd like to proceed and introduce the exhibit binder and present a brief summary of the facts, if I may, Your Honor.
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor. On Exhibit 5, we have the decision and order adopting the stipulated settlement and disciplinary order. Here, respondent admits the truth of every charge in the allegation. Again, this is Exhibit 5 in the exhibit binder before you. It also has a copy of the accusation. Here, respondent admits the truth of every charge in the allegation and the accusation. Respondent's license was revoked, revocation stayed, and placed on probation for 5 years or the time necessary to complete the board's drug and alcohol monitoring program, plus 1 year, whichever is longer. In this case, 5 years was the turning point. The terms included restrictions on practice monitoring, a condition on abstention from alcohol, biological fluid testing, random biological fluid testing, and attendance in a drug and alcohol recovery monitoring program. Under the accusation, the first cause for discipline involves petitioner's conviction in October of 2012 for possession of a controlled substance. The facts are as follows. The facts alleged and admitted in this case are that on June 9, 2011, petitioner was stopped by CHP for signs of intoxication. Petitioner failed the field sobriety test, and breathalyzer test reveals the test results show a .08 and .079, respectively. Now, while in custody, a secondary search revealed 1.6 grams of cocaine. Now, these same allegations are charged separately in the accusation as violations of Business and Professions Codes 2660H and Business and Professions Code 2238, involving violations of a drug statute, and 2239 for use of alcohol in a dangerous manner. The effective date of the board's decision to adopt the stipulated settlement in this case was June 2nd, 2014. Other facts of note to be considered in terms of rehabilitation efforts is that the petitioner in this case had a prior misdemeanor conviction for DUI in May of 2005. So this is the second conviction. Exhibit 4 before you.
Did you want to offer Exhibit 5?
Yes, Your Honor.
I've marked for identification as Exhibit 5 the certified copy of the accusation and other appropriate documents. Any objection to Exhibit 5?
Yes.
And your objection to Exhibit 5 is?
My objection is that from what I understood, that the discipline that I received for this incident, the previous incident that I had back in 2005 wasn't part of the discipline or wasn't mentioned in this accusation?
This hearing today is not to relitigate the accusation that you had before.
Okay.
It is instead to determine whether you have had sufficient rehabilitation in order to grant your petition. But the terms and conditions of the accusation and the stipulated settlement that you entered into are relevant to this matter. So I'm going to overrule your objection and allow them in. Exhibit 5 is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Exhibit 4, Your Honor, is the actual petition for early termination of probation, which was filed by Mr. Jahoviak on June 7, 2016, 2 years after the effective date of the board's decision of June 2nd, 2014. That is Exhibit 4.
I've marked for identification as Exhibit 4 the petition package. Any objection?
No.
Exhibit 4 is in evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. Exhibit 4 is accompanied with petitioner's narrative statement where he accepts responsibility for his actions and states that he has completed the 3-month drug and alcohol diversion program, participated in Maximus drug and alcohol diversion program for 4 weeks, which consisted of 30 continuous days of a 12-step program, 4 weeks of bi-weekly group therapy sessions with healthcare professionals or for healthcare professionals, and an evaluation by a clinical psychologist. After 30 days, he was excused from the program for being clinically inappropriate. As part of his rehabilitation, he has read several books and journals, according to his narrative, and he is current in his CPR certification and completed continuing education. Also attached to his petition are the requisite 2 recommendation letters from peers and supervisors. His supervisor, Mr. Herman, observed him for 3 years in a professional capacity. He is aware of the disciplinary action by the PT board and made it clear that his observations were limited to the office setting. He strongly supports the present petition. Petitioner's other supervisor also strongly supports the present petition. He stated that he has noticed a change in petitioner's demeanor. Petitioner is much more focused and has a new sensitivity to patients with drug and alcohol issues. He's observed to be more patient and more attentive. He stated that overall, petitioner has excelled and matured since being on probation. Other exhibits, Your Honor, that I'd like to move for jurisdictional purposes would be Exhibit 1, the Certificate of Licensure.
I've marked for identification as Exhibit 1, the certification of licensure. Any objection?
No.
Exhibit 1 is in evidence.
Exhibit 2, the copy of notification of hearing to petitioner.
I've marked for identification as Exhibit 2. The notification of hearing. Any objection?
No objections.
Exhibit 2 is in evidence.
Exhibit 3 is the final report of probation monitor Monty Martin.
I've marked for identification as Exhibit 3. That report. Any objection?
No objections.
Exhibit 3 is in evidence.
Other facts of note, Your Honor, I'd like to stress that according to probation monitor Monty Martin, petitioner presently owes $3,097.20. At some point, we will ask him, obviously, if this petition were granted, that he be able to pay the entire balance. Your Honor, at this point, Your Honor, because the burden is on the petitioner, I have nothing further at this time, but I would like to reserve the right to question the petitioner.
You may do so. Did you want to offer Exhibit 6 into evidence? Or-
Yes, Your Honor. If the court may take a judicial or official recognizance of the laws and regulation, Your Honor.
I've marked for identification as Exhibit 6 the copies of the laws and regulations. Any objection to my taking official notice of it?
No.
Exhibit 6 is officially noticed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Jahoviak, it is now your opportunity to put on your case. If you would please stand, I will swear you in.
Sure.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please be seated? And Mr. Jehoviak, what we are most interested in hearing about, as I explained earlier, is your rehabilitation since you entered into the stipulated settlement to show that it would not be contrary to the public health interest or welfare to grant your petition.
Okay.
You may proceed.
All right. I first want to apologize for my actions that have brought me here today. I have taken full responsibility for my actions, and I feel strong with my sobriety and recovery. And I just want to thank all of you for allowing me to be present here today to present my argument for early termination. And I have more documents to submit.
Did you bring enough for everybody,
I did.
including Mr. Tan?
Yes. Start.
Why don't you bring them forward?
Sure.
Mr. Tan, I will hand you one,
Thank you, Your Honor.
and I will hand the board members ones as well. But first, I am going to mark this as Exhibit 7. And then we'll make sure all of the board members have copies. Thank you. And if you could describe for us a little bit what's in Exhibit 7?
Sure. So the new documents I submitted are updated certificates of completion for continuing ed, current CPR certification, and I also listed self-help books that I have read in the last 2 years.
Anything further you would like to say before Mr. Tan asks you questions?
Nothing further.
Mr. Tan,
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Jehoviak. How you doing today?
Thank you.
Is this your first time?
This time.
Okay. Let me first ask you, what is your sobriety date?
My sobriety date is May 2014.
Do you know what day?
No, I don't.
Okay. Now, you have a prior DUI in 2005, correct?
I do.
And then another one in 2012, correct?
I'm not sure if I was convicted for a DUI or just convicted for possession of a controlled substance.
You're correct. It is possession for controlled substances. But let me ask you, what were the factors that led to this issue? Perhaps, may I call it addiction issue?
The factors that led to the most recent incident.
Both. It seems
Both.
like it's a continuation of, I guess, of a habit. It seems like, if you don't mind me.
Well, so since 2005, I would say that I would probably classify myself as just an occasional drinker. And so this incident that happened 5 years ago in 2011, it wasn't something I don't normally take drugs. I'm an occasional drinker. It was an incident that that I take full responsibility for, but it was just a big mistake at the time. Something that I didn't think about my consequences, my actions, and just a careless mistake that happened that night.
Okay. Now, let's talk about your efforts at rehabilitation. You were discharged from the program for being clinically inappropriate. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes. So part of that program was going to group meetings and also being interviewed by a clinical psychologist. And I believe I got a positive letter from the director of the group meetings that was meetings involved with specifically healthcare professionals. I got a positive letter from him that probably helped my being excused from the program. And I also got a positive letter from the clinical psychologist that believed me when I told my story that this was just an isolated incident.
Okay. Do you hold any other licenses here or in another state?
No, I don't.
Okay. And other than the discipline that you have in 2012, your license has never been disciplined?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have any pending civil action or criminal action other than outstanding parking tickets?
None.
Okay. What is your support network currently like?
So my support network would be my family. I'm close to my parents. My fiance. I recently am engaged, and I have great coworkers. I have great supervisors at work. So these are all people I'm in close and constant contact with on a daily to weekly basis. So that I have a strong and positive support system, and these people that are around me don't do drugs and don't drink at all.
Do you have any current stressors right now that would, necessitate a relapse?
No, none at all.
If you were to have any stressors in life right now, how would you deal with them?
I think that the severity of this case and the fear of losing it all and given a second chance with this license after initially it was going to be revoked, and I was able to negotiate to get it on probation, that there's too much on the line, too many consequences, that I don't think that I would put myself in a position to fail again.
Now, let's again focus on your
Okay.
rehabilitation efforts. Let's go through Exhibit 7. These are part of your continuing education courses, correct?
Correct.
Sorry, where are we now on Exhibit 7?
Yes, Your Honor. Exhibit 7 is part of your, these are mandatory continuing education, correct?
Yes.
Did you do any units, additional units over and above what is mandatory?
I did.
How many units did you do over and above what is mandatory?
I believe 8 units
Okay. 8 units
on
over.
on top of the 30.
Okay. What were those 8 units?
I did one on alcoholism, and I did another one on Parkinson syndrome.
Okay. Did you complete all the sanctions under your 2012 conviction? Were you put in a program?
I was put in a court-appointed drug diversion program for 3 months, which I completed immediately.
Have you filed a petition for expungement or whatnot?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Are you currently in any program, AA, Pills Anonymous, any of those?
I am currently, the last 2 months, during this process of application and things that I've gone through, I have gone back to AA once a week. I go back to talk about my story and help with my recovery and hear people talk about theirs too.
Okay. You've completed the 12-step program?
Yes,
Okay.
I completed, and I'm currently in a 12-step program once a week.
Okay. Do you currently see a therapist or a psychiatrist?
No, I do not.
Okay. And you filed this petition 2 years after the effectivity date of the board's decision, correct?
That's correct.
What are your plans for the future if this petition was granted?
My plans for the future are just continue to work hard, and since this happened, I do take my profession more serious now. If I was off probation, it would be nice to be able to travel with my fiance, because right now that's limited by biological testing, which is limiting me from international traveling right now. So I would do that and just continue to work hard in my profession, which I have been for 17 years now.
You would continue under the same supervisor?
Yes, I would.
Okay. And in terms of biological fluid testing, do you recall how many times you were tested?
pretty close to 100 times so
Okay.
far.
And all of them were negative?
All of them were negative.
My last question is, you presently owe $3,097.20. How do you propose to pay that before, or how do you propose to pay that amount?
So during this 5-year sentence, I've been paying this in monthly installments, but if I was excused for early termination, I would be able to pay everything at the time. I could pay the rest of the balance in full.
Okay. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, it's now time for member questions. Vice President Rabina Amen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
In May of 2005, when you had your DUI, would you say that you had a substance problem then
A substance problem?
with the alcohol?
No, I don't think so.
In May of 2000, well, not May, the 2014 or the 2011 DUI, would you say that you had an alcohol problem then?
You mean June 2011? Is that right?
Oh, I'm sorry, June 2011.
No, I classify myself after that as an occasional drinker.
Okay.
But prior to that, I was probably more of a social drinker back in 2005.
Okay. And would you say that you had a substance problem with cocaine?
In 2011?
2011, yes.
No.
Okay. As far as attending AA meetings, why do you think you had a lapse from the time that you completed the 12-step program and all of the requirements for drug and alcohol programs? Why do you think that you stopped and then started again once you petitioned for early termination?
I decided to focus more on my support systems during that time and the self-help books. But I think that during this whole process of applying with the application and everything that was going on, it kind of gave me some self-reflection that it's never too late to work on myself a little more. So I decided to commit myself to going once a week, ongoing, and that I don't consider that I don't have a stop date with that time. I enjoy it. I get information from there, and I give back. I get to tell my story again and help people, and I guess part of the healing process is hearing other people's stories too. So I enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you still consider yourself an occasional drinker?
No. After this, no.
Okay. Do you think you'll ever drink again?
I don't think so. I've been through, I don't feel like I need to attend any social events. I've been to weddings. I've been to birthday parties. I've hosted Thanksgiving, Christmas at my house. So it's not something that I feel that I need to have in my system,
Okay.
nor drugs also.
Okay. And when you signed and agreed to the stipulation of 5 years, you agreed to it at the time. Why is it so important to you to come here today and ask for early release from termination? You've mentioned, wanting to be able to travel and the biological testing, but just give us your most passionate reasons why you think 2 years is enough when you agreed to the 5.
I did agree to the 5, but right now at the 2-year mark, I just feel very strong about my recovery and sobriety, and I do feel like that'll be something that'll be ongoing forever with me. But I think at this point I feel very good about my sobriety and recovery, and that's why I decided to petition now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jahoviak.
President Ellaby.
Good morning.
Good morning.
To piggyback off of Alicia's previous question, how has being a probationer been a burden as a PT?
There's been no professional burden with everything that's been with me. My work has been very flexible. It was easy to find work monitors. My work has been really good with me right now. I think the only, not burden, but the challenge that might be in the future is if I was going to find additional work that I think it could be possibly a little bit challenging to find a work monitor because of some of the stipulations with that, where they have to be a licensed California therapist for 5 years. And so I'm in skilled nursing facility, and there's a lot of travelers, there's a lot of new grads, a lot of international therapists that don't have that. So I could see that being a problem with applying for additional work or changing jobs, finding a work monitor that's been licensed for 5 years in the state of California. But other than that, that's the only burden or challenge that I have right
Okay.
now.
Thank you. And you say that you're currently in AA.
I'm currently
Would you consider being a sponsor?
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
Yeah, I would.
And are there any terms of your probation that are particularly restrictive to you at this time?
Only the travel, but that's nothing big or nothing related to me working. The most important thing is I'm very grateful that I'm still able to work and everything inside of work. There's no major burdens at all. So I don't have any complaints at all or any burdens.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Member Dominguez?
Good morning, Mr. Johodiak. My first question is really just sort of a housekeeping question. In your narrative statement, the second sentence says, in June 2001, I was arrested in Concord. I suspect that's a typo.
That's a typo.
Just wanted to make sure. My question was in the second sentence of the narrative, it says, in June 2001, I was arrested. I
It
just
should
wanted
be
to make sure that
2011. Sorry.
we weren't having an additional, one before. The second question is, also in the narrative statement, you say that after 30 days, you were excused from the program for being clinically inappropriate. Could you tell me a little bit about what you think that term means and why the psychologist might have come to that conclusion?
So this is the clinically inappropriate, where that was the term that they said in
Sure.
my release document, and I think that's just after all the conversations with the head of the program, with I guess my input and everything from the group meetings that I went to, and also from the clinical psychologist. They didn't determine that I had enough addictive behaviors to benefit from the program, and that's why they determined I was clinically inappropriate. And when they excused me, they asked if I would ever do anything like this again, and I said, of course not, and that was the end of it.
Okay, thank you. Really, one last question, and it's sort of off legal counsel's earlier question, where he asked you if you knew your date of sobriety. And my question to you would be, how important do you think knowing one's date of sobriety is to the sort of the recovery and rehabilitation process?
I think that's very important, and I do remember the month. I don't remember the exact date of it, but it is important. That's something that in AA meetings that they consider that their birthday. So if you have birthday this month or any birthdays coming up, that's like your sobriety date. Some people have in there 5 days. Some people have 15 years of sobriety. So mine is May of, it's not a date, but it is a month, May of 2014, something I do remember.
Thank you. No other questions, Your Honor.
Member Drummer?
I don't have any questions at this time.
Thank you. Member McMillan?
Good morning.
Good morning. Hi.
I'd like to know, when you had to report this to your employers, can you tell me how you felt approaching them with this type of news? Because I see they think very highly of you, but I'd like to know how you felt.
It was very, very hard, very difficult. I felt disappointed in myself, and I felt that they were going to be disappointed in me, and I didn't know if I was going to be disciplined or fired. I didn't know if I was going to still have a job. I was happy and surprised of how supportive they were. I didn't know what to expect. It's not something that you have in an everyday conversation with your supervisors, with the owner of the company that you work for, who is Tom Herman, is the owner of the company I work for, and my supervisor. And so I was just really happy and ecstatic of how, and it just was a weight off my shoulders of how they supported me and worked with me through this probation period.
Good. My next question is, there are a lot of people out there who have overachiever personalities, and it really looks like that you really got busy taking care of the things that you needed to do in order to finish your probation. How do we know that that's not just your personality and you just knocked this out just to get it over with? I mean, I'm looking at all the work that you've done, and it's very impressive, but I'd like for you to explain the difference, or how it can be conceived as if, oh, well, I'll just get it done.
I think the fear of the consequences, like I said earlier, that this is, you guys give me a second chance with work and everything, and I have so much on the line. Like since this all happened, I've purchased a house. I have a house, I have a fiance, I have a great job that I'm happy with, and so much is on the line. So a lot of that is just fear of the consequences, and I know I won't be given a third chance at this, so this is it for me.
And my last question is, I see that you did read some self-help books. I'd like to know, were those recommended to you, or did you just go?
No, I just walked into a bookstore and I was looking around. I don't think I was even looking for those books, but I just happened to be passing by like a self-help psychology section, and I just picked them out. Some of them are new, some of them are old, from the 70s, 80s. And they were all a little bit different about a lot of them were just about like there's a fine line between making good decisions, bad decisions, and just about thinking before you make decisions, a little bit about critical thinking, and they seemed very helpful.
Okay, one last statement. So I know if I go through, and I've been through breakups before, and I can go to a bookstore and find a book that says I was perfect and he was wrong. So I see the books that you chose to read. What was the most impactful thing that you received since those books weren't recommended?
The most impactful thing, well, each of them were a little bit different, and so some of them were based on psychology, some of them were based on science, and so I tried to get the most out of it that I could out of each one of the books, and basically just looked at them carefully and try to get a better understanding. It was kind of a self-reflection from reading those books, and it just kind of made me think more about my decision making and how I could do it better.
So you would say decision making was the most impactful
Yes.
thing that you learned?
Decision making.
Thank you.
Okay.
Member Watkins.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm gonna have a few questions.
Sure.
I see a guy being described as fantastic, willing to go the extra mile, and someone saying in your that it's out of character. So the immediate thing that it prompted within me was in 2005, one event happened, and you wrote it off as occasional drinking. And in 2011, June of 2011, another event happened that is along that same vein. And now it's got your attention because there's potentially, there was more consequences. But then there's a little addition, and there's the, discovery of some substances with you. So my question is, in 2005, there was a trigger that set that off. And in 2011, there's another trigger. And since you've been doing your research in the self-help book and doing all the, AA meetings, which is awesome, what have you discovered to be those triggers?
I'm sorry?
What have you discovered that
Oh, what
triggered
if I-
2005 and 2011 event?
I discovered that the trigger for 2005 was just more of careless social behavior, having a good time, and the trigger, I think the trigger for the 2011 was more of an isolated incident. This was something, the substance, I was hanging around a group of friends, the wrong group of friends, and the substance was given to me at the time for a pick-me-up because I was tired and I was hanging out with people that evening, and I had a drink or two in about a four-hour period and left. So that's the difference in the two triggers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see that. So my second question would then be, so that's the story that, for 2005 and 2011. So when you in AA and you tell your story, can you give us like a sample of what that sounds like? Just, the brief of, because there's a history of since 2005 running into 2011, do you tell the 2011 story or do you tell the 2005 story?
I do tell both stories, and they are a little bit different. And I have about 20 minutes to tell my story, so I do have plenty of time. And so I tell the 2005, I tell about the 2011, but I try to really focus, besides those two, just of where I was, where I am now, and what I've done to get this far. The work, that it's not easy, the work, and it's not over yet also. This is the focus of my story in those meetings is the work I've put in, where I'm at now, and how the work needs to continue, I need to continue working on myself and keep going back to the meetings, that it's not something that's going to just stop one day.
So this is ongoing. My final question, and in this, what I'm getting at is I really want to discover within you that, you've awoken something within you that really knows this is my triggers, A, B, and I'm pointing to something particularly in the material that we have where someone pointed out that, you don't attend work functions and, they make up their own story about why that may be. And I see more of you've recognized that maybe social environments is a trigger because in 2005 and in 2011, social was a trigger. What have you done to address that moving forward in the future, if you know that that's the only one that we can see right now?
Well,
aside from the avoidance.
No, I think the avoidance is the wrong way to go about it. I don't avoid any of those social situations. I do attend work functions, Christmas parties. I host Christmas parties, Thanksgiving at my house. I've been to weddings. I don't shy away from those, and I don't want people in those situations. I mean, my support system, my family, my friends, they don't drink, like none to occasionally at all. But I don't want people around me also to feel uncomfortable around me, because it's not something that makes me uncomfortable when I'm around people who are having a good time, having a few drinks in a social setting, like at a sports bar or at a holiday party or anything. That's not something it doesn't make me uncomfortable. It doesn't make me avoid the situation at all.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Member Alviso?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Wonder if you can help me reconcile something, because I can't quite bridge a gap. When I heard Ms. Rabina Amen ask you if you had a substance abuse problem that related to either the 2005 or the 2011 event, you said no. And so I'm trying to understand why you're in AA and why you might even consider being a sponsor if you never consider yourself to have a substance abuse problem.
Well, I think I was unclear of what the substance was. because I didn't have any desire to have any drugs, so that was just an isolated incident, a bad mistake. But as in regards to the alcohol, the drinking, that was I'm sorry, what was the question again? What was?
Question is I think I've understood you to deny whether you have a substance abuse problem, but I hear you attending AA and abstaining. So help me understand that. If you don't have a problem, why go, and why not drink?
Well, at first I had to go. I had to. I had to go, I think 30 for the program to start. I had to go 30 days, 30 sessions, part of the Maximus diversion program, and I also had to go also for the previous diversion program. But and then when I resubmitted this application, I decided to go back because I felt like I didn't want, and even though I didn't have like a problem with addiction, I felt like I wanted to make sure that nothing happens in the future and nothing was going to come back and I wasn't going to mess up again. That's why I keep going back.
And have you, in the 30 days that you did, or as you're currently attending meetings, have you worked the steps?
Yes, I've worked the steps.
Okay. And was there one that was meaningful?
I think, let's see what we got here. I think probably, I don't have it down here, all the steps, but I think the second step, I don't remember the words exactly to the second step, but I remember that, meaning that that you have to give in and you're powerless to your God and everything, and that going through that step just made me humble and realize that I had to give in and continue working on myself, that I wasn't at the point that I thought I was during that time with recovery, that I still had a long way to go. Okay.
And then just one more question.
Sure.
The continuing education that you submitted, is that in preparation for your renewal?
Yes, it is. It is.
And were they completed on the dates that they show?
Yes, they were.
So all the classes from Keeping You Informed, were those online?
Those were all online.
And are you sure the hours of those are correct?
Yeah, I'm sure.
And the dates are correct?
And the dates are correct.
Because they're all August 3rd and it's 30 hours.
So I think they're broken down, and the hours aren't broken down individually, maybe like they should, but the whole informed, all of them all together are supposed to add up to 30 hours. Plus I did 4 additional of Parkinson's and 4 additional of alcoholism.
But were they all completed on the 3rd?
Yes, they were. Because my license, I just did them recently because my license renewal is at the end of September. So I just did them recently. I did them around the same time that I sent in payment for my license renewal of this year.
And it wasn't something that you just finished them on the 3rd, you did them all on the 3rd?
I did them all on the 3rd.
Okay.
Okay.
Any further questions from any board members?
Yes, please.
Mr. Drummer?
Jeff, I need to just clarify. You've made the statement that the cocaine that you had in possession was a one-time thing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You'd never done cocaine before that?
I had done it once before, like maybe in my teens, like 19, 20 at a house party, one other time.
Okay.
That I remember.
And then you've mentioned several times that you've worked on some of these things because of a fear of consequences. And that's part of consequences are something that you have to face if you do something wrong and you're caught. Are there any other reasons about why you've worked to why this is important and why you will not use again?
Besides the consequences, I've disappointed during this situation. It's been a disappointment to myself. It's been a disappointment to my family, my support system. So I don't want to let myself down. I don't want to let them down. But most important is just doing it for myself.
Anything further from any other board members? Any further questions? Mr. Tan, did you have any further questions?
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. It's now an opportunity for both Mr. Tan and Mr. Jahoviak to sum up. Mr. Tan, did you want to make a summing up?
Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to point out to the members of the board that this petition is filed at the earliest opportune time, 2 years. So, in my office's view, the Attorney General's view, such a petition, to be granted, must be supported by evidence that's overwhelming and exceptional, because this petition is filed very, very early. The reason that we have a 5-year probation is because only through the passage of time is the public assured that a person is rehabilitated. In this case, only exceptional, clear, convincing, overwhelming evidence can be used to support such an early petition. And I'd like to walk the board through the evidence that's here today. Under the regulations, the criteria is the nature and severity of the crime under consideration. DUI and possession of cocaine is a serious matter. Evidence of any acts committed subsequent to the act of crime. According to Mr. Jahoviak, no such civil action or criminal action is pending. The time that has elapsed since the commission of the act or crime, again, it's very early. 2 years is very early. So this petition needs to be exceptional. Number 4 is the extent to which the applicant has complied with the terms of parole, probation, or any other sanctions imposed on the applicant. In this case, I commend Mr. Jahoviak for completing the clinical portion. I believe he was discharged for being clinically inappropriate on the program. But the evidence before us here today in terms of the CE classes, they were all taken in August and I believe June of 2016. This is a red flag for us. The reason is it seems like these courses were taken in preparation for this hearing. Another issue that was pointed out by one of the board members was that these courses were all taken on August 3rd, all 30 hours of them. As we all know, there are only 24 hours to the day. So that might be a red flag as well. Perhaps Mr. Jahoviak can clear it out, make it clear to us later in his closing statement as well. The other issue is the date of sobriety. As pointed out by one of the board members, this is extremely important. This is the cornerstone of rehabilitation. They teach this in AA. This is basically your birthday. And for you to forget your birthday, that's why it's the first question that I ask. It raises some concerns. Last but not the least is central in terms of evidence of rehabilitation is the acceptance of responsibility. That's number 1. And also an admission that there is an issue. What we heard here today is very scant. Details, generalizations, buzzwords. I'm changed now. But I didn't really hear the triggers. What were the issues that led to the 2005 incident? What about the 2011 incident? Certainly, when there's smoke, there's fire. In this case, we have 2 incidents, 2 isolated incidents. That's a bit of an oxymoron for me. 2 isolated incidents. That means it's not isolated, that there is an issue. With that, Your Honor, members of the board, the Attorney General's office is here again, not in an adversarial position, but rather to protect the public interest. And taking that into view, there's just so many red flags in this petition that I don't think our office can recommend this petition be granted. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Do you have any objection to Exhibit 7?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 7 is in evidence. Mr. Jahoviak, it's now your opportunity to make a summing up.
I don't have anything further to say.
Did you want to respond to any of the issues that Mr. Tan raised?
I do want to respond to the continuing ed challenge that he had. But the way that these continuing ed courses are set up, that whether you put in some time and whether it's 15 hours or 45 hours, that you put in the time, you read the material, and however long that takes. I don't remember how long it takes. Sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. That when you complete the test, it comes out, and that's how the hours and the certificates are completed. That's how the system is with the online courses. That's all I have to add.
Any further questions from any board members? All right, thank you. The matter is submitted. As I said at the beginning of the hearing, after both petitions are heard, the board will go into deliberations, and sometime in the future, you will be getting a decision.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. We are off the record. Our court reporter will give you a document that shows if you ever want to order a transcript of the hearing, how you do so.
Okay.
And then we're going to change our petitioner. So if Mr. Walker would come up, and Mr. Jahoviak, thank you so very much. Does anyone need a break? Yes. All right. We'll be taking a 5-minute? 5-minute break for anybody who may need one. Thank you. You're welcome. All right. Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Are you ready to go back on the record?
I am.
Do you have any questions before we go back on the record?
I don't.
All right. Let's go back on the record. We are back on the hearing record before the Physical Therapy Board of California for our second petition today, the petition for reinstatement of James Dale Walker Jr., OAH number 2016-070390. There is a quorum of the board. My name is Karen Rand. I'm the administrative law judge assigned to hear this matter. We have today our Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Tan, and we have our petitioner, James Dale Walker Jr. Mr. Walker, you watched the last petition hearing, didn't you?
I did.
And you heard the explanation of how the proceedings go.
Yes.
Do you have any questions before we begin?
I don't.
All right, then I will allow Mr. Tan to proceed.
Again, Your Honor, I would like to proceed by a brief introduction and then introducing all the exhibits and perhaps a brief summary.
You may do so.
Thank you, Your Honor. Again, members of the board, members of the public, Your Honor, I'm appearing on behalf of the Attorney General pursuant to Government Code Section 11522. I'd like you to turn to Exhibit 8 of the other exhibit binder before you today. It is marked James Dale Walker Jr. Exhibit 8 is a copy of the laws and regulations, and I'm not going to go into much detail since we've already done so in the earlier case. Your Honor, I'd like to, Your Honor, to take official notice of Exhibit 8, the laws and regulations, for today's proceeding.
I've marked for identification as Exhibit 8 the laws and regulations. Mr. Walker, any objection to my taking official notice?
No.
I take official notice of Exhibit 8.
Exhibit 7 is the decision in order adopting the stipulated surrender. That is Exhibit 7. A certified copy of a stipulated surrender effective February 21st, 2013.
I've marked for identification as Exhibit 7 the stipulated surrender. Any objection?
No.
Exhibit 7 is in evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. Here, respondent admits the truth of every charge in the allegation in the amended accusations. Here, respondent's PTA license was revoked. Next in line, Your Honor, is the certified copy of the accusation, which is on Exhibit 5, and Exhibit 6 is the certified copy of the first amended accusation filed September 21st, 2013. The amended accusation in this case is the operative document. Exhibit 6. Your Honor, I'd like to move Exhibit 5 and 6 into evidence as well.
I've marked for identification as Exhibit 5 the original accusation and as Exhibit 6 the amended accusation. Any objection?
No.
Exhibits 5 and 6 are in evidence.
I'd like the board to turn to Exhibit 6. And Exhibit 6, the first amended accusation outlines the charges or allegations which were admitted by respondent, which resulted in the surrender of his license. The first cause for discipline involves gross negligence. The first amended accusation alleged that in April of 2009, petitioner was employed as a physical therapist assistant, and that while on duty was observed in an apparent state of impairment. When confronted, petitioner stated that he was taking Percocet and Valium and an unnamed muscle relaxant. 3 days later, he contacted the HR department stating that he became addicted to prescription drugs. Petitioner completed a 10-day detox program, and secondary to his inpatient treatment, petitioner was diagnosed as dependent on opiates and alcohol. These allegations were alleged in the alternative as the second cause for discipline for the use of dangerous drug under Business and Professions Code Section 2660H and 2239, and also alternatively pled as a third cause for discipline for addiction to excessive use of any habit-forming drug, Business Professions Code Section 2660F. The fourth cause for discipline involves the use of alcohol in a dangerous manner. This involves a separate incident which came after the 2009 incident, after petitioner has attended the detox program. On or about August 13 of 2012, petitioner was convicted of a DUI in Kings County involving an incident in Hanford, California on December 2011. In this case, petitioner failed to stop at a red light and was pulled over by Hanford PD. Petitioner failed the field sobriety test, and a blood sample tested positive for alcohol at 0.22%, which is high. The fifth cause for discipline in this case involves another conviction of a crime involving alcohol. This one occurred prior to the 2008 incident in the office. On or about May 2008, before the Superior Court of Tulare County, petitioner was convicted after a guilty plea of a misdemeanor DUI. In this case, petitioner was stopped by Visalia PD after he was traveling in the opposite lane without his headlights on. He failed the field sobriety test, and breathalyzer test revealed a .06 and another .06 respectively. However, a subsequent blood draw revealed the presence of benzodiazepines. This same convictions were pled in the alternative as the sixth cause for discipline in the amended accusation for conviction of crimes substantially related to the profession. Also, as a disciplinary consideration, it was pled in the first amended accusation that the petitioner was ordered to pay a cite and fine by the board. The effective date of the board's decision to adopt the stipulated surrender was September 21st, 2013. Your Honor, Exhibit 3 is the next in order. This is the petition for reinstatement filed by Mr. Walker on May 14th, 2016. This is a little over 2 years after the effective date of the board's decision of September 21st, 2013. I'd like to move that into evidence, Your Honor, that petition with the accompanying exhibits.
I've marked for identification as Exhibit 3 the petition just described. Any objection?
No.
Exhibit 3 is in evidence.
Part of that petition includes the stipulated surrender order, multiple certificates for classes attended, including continuing education classes. We also see letters of support from previous and current supervisor, and also the petitioner's narrative. The petitioner states in his narrative that he moved to Oregon and was granted a probationary PTA license in Oregon by virtue of the surrender here in California. The probation term was for 1 year, during which he was ordered to check in with the Oregon board and describe his rehabilitation efforts. He also underwent a random drug and alcohol testing program by his current employer. He states that he practiced in a rural setting and regularly participated in AA and Pills Anonymous. He works with a program sponsor and currently clean and sober for 3.5 years. His petition is accompanied by 4 letters of support. One from his prior employer recommended that the board look at the petitioner's current employer. So it was more of a look at the present condition. Perhaps he or she does not have a current idea of the rehabilitation efforts. The second letter comes from Optimal Rehab, a prior colleague who has remained in touch with petitioner. This letter recommendation is more personal in nature. It does not speak of petitioner's present professional capacity. The fourth letter comes from petitioner's present supervisor, Andrea Van Kampen, who stated the petitioner has been a hard worker, compliant with the conditions imposed by his employer regarding testing, and sober. I'd like to note that the current letter by Ms. Andrea Van Kampen is actually towards the end of Mr. Walker's petition after the certificates. Just in case you were wondering where it was, it's not chronological in order, and it's not grouped together with the other letters of recommendation. It's closer to the end. And last but not the least is David Mahler, which is a letter from his sponsor, from his AA sponsor, who strongly supports the petition as well. Your Honor, I'd like to move on to the next exhibit, which is Exhibit 4, Probation Monitor Monty Martin's final report, which I'd like to move into evidence.
I've marked for identification as Exhibit 4 that report. Any objection?
No.
Exhibit 4 is in evidence.
And Exhibit 1 is the Certificate of Non-Licensure, which shows petitioner's current license status as surrendered.
I've marked for identification as Exhibit 1 that certification. Any objection?
No.
Exhibit 1 is in evidence.
And Exhibit 2 is the copy of notification of hearing to the petitioner.
I've marked for identification as Exhibit 2 that notice. Any objection?
No.
Exhibit 2 is in evidence.
And, Your Honor, at this point, we rest. Because the burden is on the petitioner, we have nothing further, but we would like to reserve the right to question the petitioner.
Thank you. Mr. Walker, it's now your opportunity to put on your case. If you would stand, I will swear you in. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. Mr. Walker, you may proceed. As you heard in our previous petition hearing, what the board is most interested in hearing is about your rehabilitation.
Okay,
You may proceed.
thank you. I want to thank you for having me here this morning. And I traveled down here from Oregon today. I'm currently living in the state of Oregon. As far as my rehabilitative efforts are concerned, I started Well, I've been attending AA throughout the years, through quite a few many years, and but I've had periods where I didn't do that, and I think that's what got me in trouble. I know that's what got me in trouble, and on or about September 5th of 2012, I really started plugging into the program and getting to work on my rehab in the state of Oregon. I met a really great guy up there, and he took me on. He sponsored me. That's David Mahler, the gentleman that gave me a letter of recommendation. And I've been attending meetings and working with David since that time. And I've been through previous drug and alcohol programs, but I believe that I was not successful because I didn't continue to work on my rehab when I exited those programs. And I know today that my sobriety is completely contingent upon my continued work in this program. It's an ongoing process, and as long as I stay connected to the program, I stay sober. And if I don't stay connected to the program, then there's a chance for relapse, and I understand that more than ever today. So I know that it's of great importance for me to continue to work the program and stay connected with my sponsor, and that has worked well for me for almost 4 years now. And I'm doing well currently, and I think my life is definitely in a much more sound, stable position than the last time I was in front of the board. And I have worked very hard to maintain a good standing as a therapist in Oregon. And so I just, I feel strongly that as long as I stay connected to the program, then I am suitable to hold a license in California.
Are you ready for questions for Mr. Tan?
I am.
Mr. Tan.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Walker, good morning. How are you doing today,
Hi, good
sir?
morning, Mr. Tan.
Thank you for making that trip to Oregon,
Yeah, thank you.
from Oregon to here. What is your primary motivation for filing this petition?
My primary motivation for returning to the state of California is to be with my kids. And, although, Oregon is a lovely state, and it's beautiful there, and I own a home there, I have a good job, everything's in order, life is going well for me. I miss my kids.
Okay. So you mentioned you met this Mr. Mahler, who is a program sponsor in Oregon. Assuming your petition is granted and assuming you're put on probation, for example, how do you fill that void when Mr. Mahler is in Oregon?
How would I fill the void of not having a sponsor?
Not just any sponsor. It seems that Mr. Mahler made quite the impact on you.
Mr. Mahler has been a good sponsor for me, but if I were to move back to California, my first order of business would be to find another sponsor. I think that it's probably one of the most important things in relation to the program that you have a sponsor, because the sponsor helps you to stay on track and kind of keeps you focused. And without a sponsor, it's you're kind of left on your own, and it's not a great idea not to have a sponsor in the program. So I understand the importance of having a sponsor, and that would probably be my first order of business upon returning to California, is plugging into the program and getting a sponsor.
Okay.
So I would definitely do that.
What is your sobriety date?
September 5th of 2012.
And you mentioned that prior to that date, you attended AA. Do you recall when you first attended AA?
Probably at the age of 18 was the first time that I was ever introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had periods of sobriety over the years. Sometimes it was 1 year, sometimes it was 2 years, sometimes it was a couple of months. But, in retrospect, looking back on that, I know the reason why I didn't have long-term success, and that was because I didn't stay connected to the program. And that was my demise. So I think more than anything today, I have a better understanding of the importance of staying connected with the program, and that sobriety is a one day at a time thing. It's you can only do it 24 hours a day, at a time. And as long as you stay in the program, you stand a good chance of staying sober, and I understand that today. You can't be on the fence post with this thing. You got to either be in or you're out. There's no middle ground for this. So
Let's talk about those relapses. It looks like you had 3 separate incidents involving drugs and alcohol in 2008, 2009, and 2012. Do you want to briefly touch on those 3 incidents?
well,
What happened in 2008?
the DUI charge.
Yes. What led to it, and what were the facts behind it? What were the triggers?
I think that I can sum it all up by saying that I'm not really sure what my triggers are. I think that the thing that causes me to fail is not understanding that I'm an alcoholic. And I think one has to really hit a bottom to really envelop that and know that within. And I had somebody say to me in the program one time, and it kind of stuck with me. They say, "You have a disease that tells you you don't have a disease." So I kind of look at it as a disease of the mind. And the disease in my mind tells me I'm okay. And it tells me that this won't happen again and that things will be different. And the sickness is that you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. That, this isn't going to happen again. But in actuality, it does. And you see a repeated pattern, and it's in front of you today. There's a repeated pattern. And what happened was that I couldn't admit to myself that I was an alcoholic. I couldn't do that. I didn't want to believe that. And I kept trying to take control of my own life and take control of this disease, and that just doesn't happen. You can't take control of this disease on your own. And so ultimately, you know, if you play with fire, you're going to get burned. And I realize that today drinking's not an option for me. Taking any kind of mind-altering substance is just not an option for me. And I had to hit a bottom in order to realize that. And so when I hear people talk about bottoms, I can really identify with that. But I had to really hit a bottom in my life in order to come to the realization that I'm never going to be able to gain control over this, and that the only way that I'm going to have a good life is through abstinence, which comes from my continued efforts in this program of Alcoholics Anonymous that I'm in, and that with that participation, that's the only way I'm going to have a good life.
Thank you. Do you have any current stressors in your life?
I think the only thing that really stresses me out in my life today is the distance factor that separates me from my family and my children here in California. I do well on a daily basis. You know, when I go to work, I do a good job. I'm buying a house, and I have friends in my community. I have a support system in AA. I don't know if you would really call it a stress or more than just a sadness inside me that kind of longs to come back to California and be a part of my kid's life. So.
You mentioned your kids. How many children do you have, and what ages?
I have 2 children. My son is 28 and my daughter is 26.
And how do you deal with your stressors presently? You mentioned the sadness. How do you deal with that?
Yeah. Well, you know, like I said, I mean, I do my I have, you know, the meetings that I attend, you know, on a weekly basis, and I attend 2 to 3 meetings a week. But on top of that, I've also I go to church. I've been going to the same church for a couple of years now. I play. I'm a musician. I play drums, and I play on our worship team at church, so I'm involved in that, and that really helps. So my program and my church are the 2 things that kind of keep me level and keep me moving forward.
Okay. I'm going to ask you some background questions regarding your license.
Sure.
You're presently licensed in Oregon, correct?
That's correct.
Are you licensed in any other state?
No.
What is the license that you hold in Oregon?
It's a physical therapy assistant license.
Is it still in a probationary status?
No.
Okay. With regards to discipline, other than the discipline here in California involving your surrender, has your license ever been disciplined before?
I had the discipline here, and then I had a citation, which I think you mentioned, and those were the only 2 disciplines that I've ever had.
Can you talk about the citation? What was that about?
That was for DUI.
That was the 2008 DUI, I presume, the first one?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. What about in Oregon? Has your license ever been disciplined in any other state?
No.
Okay. I'm going to ask you, because you had issues with prescription drugs, correct?
That's correct.
Are you taking any prescription drugs currently?
No.
Okay. Could you outline for us the program in terms of your employer, the biological fluid testing with your employer? Could you tell us how many times were you tested?
I believe they tested me, it was either 4 or 5 times during the course of a year.
How many years were you under that program?
One year.
1 year. So in the course of 1 year, you were only tested 4 times?
That's correct.
All 4 times came back negative.
That's correct.
Were you tested for alcohol and controlled substances?
That's correct.
Your present employer is Physical Therapy Northwest, is that correct?
Yes, PT Northwest.
Okay. And you have 1 letter of support from Miss Andrea Van Kampen?
Yes.
So the statute requires 2 letters of recommendation from your current peers and or colleagues or supervisors. Was there any reason why you only chose 1 supervisor?
As it read on the application, they were asking for 2 letters from therapists that are currently licensed by the state of California. So, in fact, I wasn't even sure whether the board would accept a letter coming from an Oregon licensed therapist. So, I did manage to get letters from 2 California licensed therapists, and then I added the Oregon therapist as well. So I was trying to abide by the rules of the application.
Okay. And Miss Andrea Van Kampen is your direct supervisor, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Could you describe your duties with Physical Therapy Northwest and how many patients you see?
I currently work at it's a small rural hospital. It's a 130-bed hospital, and we mostly see orthopedic patients, hips and knees, and then there's a general population of acute folks that we also see. There's also a small clinic across the street, and I work there 2 days a week as well. And I just see just a variety of folks over there.
I see. And you're directly supervised by Miss Andrea Van Kampen?
That's correct.
Okay. When you say direct supervision, she is present in the room the entire time?
No, I'm under her. She's the department manager. So, I mean, she's not in the room when I'm treating, but she is my manager.
Okay.
That is responsible for me. But she's on site.
Okay, on site.
On site, yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Do you do any volunteer work other than you mentioned church?
No, that's it.
Okay. And are you currently in any program? 12-step program, PA program?
I'm in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Okay. Not Pills Anonymous?
No.
Okay. What recovery step are you in currently?
I've completed the steps, and my program sponsor and I are going to be going back over them again. But we've been through them once together, and he recommends that at some point you go back through them again. So I don't, it's not a program that you complete really, that more than it's an ongoing process. It's just an ongoing life process. And so, but I have been through them once, and we're going to be going through them again. So.
Okay. And Mr. Walker, assuming you were granted a probationary license with biological fluid testing and whatnot, what are your plans here in California?
Well, I haven't secured any employment as of yet. There is an opportunity for me to resume working for my previous employer, Optimal Rehab. And so I'm kind of exploring that and looking into that. So that's a plausible direction.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Vice President Rabina Amen, may I start with you again?
Sure.
Thank
Good
you.
morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Walker, do you consider yourself an alcoholic?
Absolutely.
How many days a week are you in touch with Mr. Moeller?
I touch ground with Dave 1 to 2 times a week.
Okay. And you mentioned that being one of your priorities moving back to California is getting a sponsor here. Is that something you think you can do before you even come back? Or is that something that one usually does once you're in the environment?
I could. If I wind up returning to the Central Valley and work for my previous employer, I have a sponsor that I had before I left there, and he would be willing to, pick back up with me and keep going that way. So that could happen.
Is he someone you would want to work with again?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Sometimes big stressful events happen in life down the road, and someone who is an alcoholic might have a relapse. How are you sure that that won't happen to you?
I think my only guarantee of sobriety is my continued participation in the program. That's really the only thing that's worked for me. Like I said before, I've done outpatient programs, and those are great. They're a great way. It's a great way to kind of kickstart you and get you going. But really, where the rubber meets the road is what you're doing on a daily basis. So I think that my continued success in sobriety is really contingent upon my continued participation in the program.
And you mentioned that church and being on the worship team is also helpful for you with dealing with stresses in your life. How is that helpful? What do you get out of that?
Well, it provides a faith system. I mean, I think that, as human beings, we all want to have something that we can believe in. And for me, I'm a Christian guy, and I have a belief system. And with that said, I believe that my higher power looks after me and cares for me and wants the best for me. And so with the fact that I stay in, communication with my higher power, as we call it, that is really helps give me a firm foundation for living life.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Thank you.
President Ellaby?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have 2 questions for you.
Sure.
How has this experience affected your ability to practice as a PTA?
Well, how has it affected my ability to work as a PTA? Well, it's enabled me to work here. In Oregon, I think it was a little difficult to find work because there weren't too many folks out there that were willing to take someone on with that kind of baggage. So it was really difficult to find work, and it was very humbling to have to meet somebody for the first time and say, "Hi, my name's Jim, and then, by the way, I've got this stuff that follows me." It makes it super hard starting out a relationship with an employer that way. Some people understand addiction and some people don't, and I was grateful and blessed to find the folks that were willing to take a chance on me, and they've been great with me. But it has posed a challenge, and that it wasn't very easy to go out and find work when you have this baggage that kind of follows you. So it's been difficult, but I've been able to manage it.
Has it had any effect on the quality of your patient care?
No, I think that, despite my own personal downfalls, and I've always had a real heart and passion for what I do, and the way that I care for people and care for my patients it really hasn't changed the way that I care for people.
And my final question is, what's the longest amount of time you've been able to maintain sobriety?
Let's see, I had, at one time I had 5 years. And I quit going to meetings. And I think this happens with a lot of people. You know, you get some sobriety underneath your belt, and then you think you got the bull by the horns. You know, you think that, oh, I can do this. You know, enough time's gone by, your mind starts talking to you, and you think that, you know, I must be cured. Maybe I can dabble a little bit. You know, maybe I'm okay now. But I don't forget that. I know that, you know, the only way that I can assure my success is to stay on the road that I'm on. That's proving to work for me, and there's no doubt in my mind that there can be no halfway or middle ground for me. I have to either do this thing, or it's a life or death thing. You know, this disease is very serious. It kills people. And I feel like if I had another relapse, it may very well kill me. It's serious.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Yep, thank you.
Member Dominguez?
Good morning, Mr. Walker.
Hi, good morning.
A couple of questions. Actually, the first one is a follow-up. You said 5 years was the longest period of time that you were sober. And I apologize if you gave us a date, but could you remind me when that 5-year period occurred?
That was probably, I think that was 89 through 93.
Okay. Another question I have, I believe counsel asked you if you were currently taking prescription medications. I believe you said no.
That's correct.
Is that correct? Have you been prescribed controlled substances since your license was surrendered
No.
in the state of California? No. Okay. I believe you said, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I believe I recall you saying that you had difficulty identifying the triggers that sort of lead you to stumble.
I think that the trigger for me is my mind telling me that I'm not an alcoholic. That is I don't have triggers like going out into society and seeing, you know, booze ads, or going into, you know, if I go into a place that's serving alcohol or things like that, or see people drinking around me. Those aren't triggers for me. What the trigger for me is my mind telling me that I can participate in that, and that it's going to be different. And I know that today that's just not an option for me. I think that an individual has to come to a point where they hit a bottom. And I definitely hit my bottom. And I think I solidly know in my mind that it's just not an option for me. And I know that. I feel it. I know it.
Just another follow-up question on that, Mr. Walker. I get the sense that you firmly believe in the program, and being plugged into the program is sort of the straight and narrow path to your recovery. And you've had periods throughout your life where you've sort of disengaged or unplugged from that program.
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit about what might have led you to unplug or disengage from a program that I know you believe in?
Right. again, I stayed sober for a period of time, and this happens to a lot of folks. You know, they get sober, and you know, lo and behold, their life gets better. You know, and it does. And when their life gets better, when my life got better, I thought that I didn't need that program anymore. You know, I thought my life's going good now, and I'm just going to take control of it, and everything's going to be good. And that's the disease that tells you don't have a disease. You know, and I have to remember that. You know, that if I get away from that program, then my mind starts talking to me again, and it tells me that I'm okay and that I could do these types of things, you know, that I can participate in drinking and so forth. And, you know, but history tells me that, you know, that didn't work very well. And so in times past, I got sober and life started getting good, and I felt like I could manage it on my own. And it didn't work out for me. So I've had to learn by my mistakes.
Thank you.
Member Drummer?
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for making the trip down, and thank you for sitting here in front of us.
Sure,
This
thank
is
you.
not an easy thing for us to hear, and I'm sure it's a harder thing for you to be here and to present it all.
Yeah.
A couple of questions. You included a letter from Mr. Mahler, and the letter is really, it's a to whom it may concern letter. It's a very general letter about the things that you've accomplished and his confidence in you. But I'm wondering, have you had specific conversations about coming here to apply for reinstatement of your California license, and about potentially moving to California? Have you had those conversations with him, and what kinds of things has he said?
Sure, you know, I've talked to David about that. You know, David wishes me well. He knows that, you know, Oregon has been a good place for me, but that, you know, ultimately, I would like to, you know, return to the state of California so that I can be near my family, and he knows that's important to me. So he supports that, and but you know, as a sponsor would tell you, you know, if you're going to move, then you better have a support system lined up. And so, and I know that. I'm aware of that. And like I said to the previous question, would I have something lined up? And certainly I would, because that would just really be negligent not to. So,
Okay.
Dave and I have had that conversation.
Good.
Sure.
It seems that, to me, a little bit, as an outsider, that the move to Oregon actually was a turning point. It was opening a new chapter for you and allowing you to really focus on some of these things and to take a different view of your alcoholism and what it means to you and for your life. And so are you concerned about coming back to California and getting back, having some of that as a flashback kind of thing?
I think I'm a lot healthier. And what I mean by that is that I've really developed a strong recovery program since I was here last. When I left here, I was pretty new in sobriety, and you know, I can see how one could think that, well, you know, if you go back to your old environment, how's that going to work for you? You know, and I understand. I mean, there's there's no guarantee that, if I move somewhere that I'm not going to have stressors, that I'm not going to have temptations. I mean, that's the world we live in, and I can't stay isolated in a box to ensure my sobriety. I have to live. And so the most important thing for me in my life is my family, which is probably the most important to you folks as well. I mean, we all love our families, and moving to the state of Oregon was it was very difficult. I didn't really want to leave, but it was a way for me to support myself and continue to work in my trade, and so I did it for that reason. But it really wound up being a blessing in disguise, because it made me really have to sit and take a look at my situation and what led me there, what caused me to wind up there. And so I've had a lot of time to reflect and to rebuild my life and create a strong sobriety program. And I understand that there's going to be challenges, and there's going to be obstacles for me to return. But I think I'm in a lot healthier state of mind, and that I've come to a point of understanding and knowing what I am and what I have to do in order to live a healthy and happy life.
Thank you. Just one last thing. You were, for your Oregon license, during the first year, you were on a probationary period, and you were required to give monthly reports to the board.
Right.
Can you give me an approximation of what one of those reports would have been like?
Right.
Because we didn't get a copy of any of those, so I'm just wondering if you could
I understand.
tell me.
Essentially, what the board asked me to do was to just write a brief statement monthly as to my efforts in recovery and what I was doing to maintain my sobriety. Excuse me. And they also were aware of the fact that on top of that, my employer was ordering, random screens as well. And I think that they were satisfied with that, and they felt good about that. And so that went on for a year. And then after the year's time was up, they went ahead and, dismissed that probationary status and allowed me to work. So.
And that was something that they just did automatically because the year had expired, or did you have to go before anybody to present things?
Yeah, I had to apply to get that removed.
Okay.
And so I applied, and they kind of looked at everything, and they were satisfied with my performance, and they spoke with my employer, and they looked at the drug screens and the alcohol screens and stuff, and they were satisfied with that, so they adopted to remove that restriction.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Member McMillan?
Hello.
Hi, good morning.
So first, I'd like to commend you for your initial admittance that you had a problem and that you had a cry for help. And I also believe you when I hear you speak about your relationship with AA and programs, and that this is going to be lifelong for you. So with that being said, without getting too personal, but I would like to know why you had Percocet and those drugs. What was the need for that? And then what led you to abuse them?
Yes, good question. So I started seeing my primary doctor for problems that I was having with neck pain. And I don't really know how the neck pain originated. I'm only guessing that I had had a car wreck several years before that was non-alcohol related, but I was having this just terrible neck pain constantly, and I went to see him. He was not aware of my, my previous problem with alcohol, and which I should have been honest with him about that. But so he started, prescribing me these pain medications, and as it go, I became addicted to them, and that's kind of the way it goes with somebody who has abuse issues. You can't take anything that's mind altering. It's not a good idea. And so, I have the potential to become addicted to anything that's mind altering. And so for me, I have to, abstain from anything like that. But yeah, I started seeing him for neck pain, and he was treating me with the muscle relaxers and the pain pills and stuff like that, and it just didn't take long before I was taking more than I should, and it became a problem pretty fast.
Thank you for your honesty.
Yeah.
No more questions.
Member Watkins?
Hey, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
My questions, I'm going to have a few. My first question is, when did it all start for you? When do you remember where drinking became, or the alcohol became part of your life? If at 18, you had your first AA meeting.
Yep, in high school, it was very acceptable to drink a lot in high school, and of course, being a young guy, I wanted to fit in with everybody, and everybody else was doing it, and I wanted to do it too. And but I think I realized very early on that I did not I didn't drink like my peers. I didn't handle alcohol like my peers did. I'd drink more than them or get sick, or I realized very young that it was a problem, but I didn't want to admit that I was different from other people. And I think that's the one thing that kind of gets people hung up in the program, is that you don't want to admit that you're different from other people. You want to think that you can handle your drink just like the next guy. And that's been my downfall over the years, is that I didn't want to believe that I was any different from anybody else, and that I could be a normal drinker, and that I could participate in those kind of things, and it just kept causing me more trouble in my life over and over again, and that's ultimately what's brought me here today, but yeah, it started very early, and I think I realized it very early, but I didn't want to admit it.
So my second question is, the basis, you keep mentioning your relationship with your kids, and everyone here can feel the emotional drive behind that. So what was your relationship with your son and daughter, who's adult right now, before this 2012 incident, before September the 5th, when you made this shift into a new way of being? And then what is your relationship now to them that compels you to want to pack up your bags in Oregon and head back to California?
So, I think that alcohol has fragmented my relationship with my kids. I think if you ask them what it's like growing up in that kind of environment, it's not easy. So it was a bit strained, I think. But I always did the best job that I could, and I've always been there for my kids, no matter what. So I would say that I had a good relationship with my kids, but I think that that my alcoholism has caused them to suffer a little bit. And so I'm working on rebuilding that.
Has the distance helped? Because you sit and you have this perspective now
Right.
with regard to this relationship, because your participation is now, it's now not just automatic, a run over, or it is very deliberate. I pick up the phone. And so has that helped in cultivating this new relationship that you're working on?
I think that my my kids have they've seen the process that's taken place in me, and I think they're certainly a lot happier that I'm on the footing and the ground that I am now, as opposed to where I was. And you know, but they want to see me come back, and I think that they want a relationship with me just as much as I want with them. But we're working on rebuilding our relationship now, and
Also, your relationship with David, as you refer to him, he seems to be a central figure to having really, it sounds like this person has been instrumental in getting you, understanding you, is really an anchor of sorts. And with that anchor, you've built the support system in Oregon, and you literally built your life from scratch,
right.
which is commendable. And I mean, that is we all, if we've had setbacks, we know what it takes to just build a normal life, and not just a life of addiction that you go somewhere else because you have to, you leave your kids. So I definitely want to acknowledge you for that. The deal is, you're in this environment of the church, and you play your instruments, you're doing all these things that I just get the sense that you've built this huge, this enormous grounding in Oregon. And it has given you like some perspective into your relationships and into yourself, which we can all feel. And you mentioned something that kind of stuck with me, that you emphatically said when Mr. Drummer was speaking, asking you questions, that I need to stay on this road. I need to stay on the road that I am. And yet, at the same time, the whole point of this request is to completely take you into an environment. And what jumped at me is that you were going to go back to your previous employer, which means you're going to be back into the previous environment where some of these things occurred. And you weren't too sure-footed at the beginning about the triggers, but environmental triggers are sometimes so deep-seated in that mind disease of which you speak that I'm almost in awe, because the way you speak about the disease means you have access of seeing it. You use words like, and I want to quote you on some of this. When you refer to it that you have a disease that tells you consistently that you don't have the disease. Right. Is it possible at this moment that this very same disease has just shifted form because you're doing so well, and created an urgency to say run to California, run to what it used to be, instead of pausing for a second and really counting your blessings because you're a man of faith. And on some level, I see that this prayer that you have has been answered. And now the compilation of the 2 years is to run back to what it used to be, in the hope maybe that it's going to be different, but at the same time, being vulnerable. You can have the awareness, but there's a vulnerability. And what I do acknowledge is your sincerity in wanting to do that. And this disease has one thing that really makes whatever you have feel like it's not enough, like there's something missing. And I really want to powerfully point you to the things that are there, and to really point you to the fact that it's actually there in a very powerful way, because it sounds like you're just showing up in these relationships in a way that you have not before. So that was more about, a perspective than question and answering. So I want to just thank you for taking the time of coming out from Oregon and really to pause and ponder that, because I really feel that for you. Thank you.
Thank you. If I might comment on that,
You may do so.
I've had those same discussions in my own head, and certainly I am so grateful for where I'm at. And I have really been given some very wonderful opportunities to live in a beautiful environment. I've got a good church home foundation, a good recovery foundation with a good sponsor. And why would a guy want to throw all that away? Geographically, they talk about, in the program, they talk about people doing what they call geographical fixes. If I move here, then I'll be okay. If I move over there, then I'll be okay. And my intent is not to fix myself by moving. I don't think it's going to fix me. I don't think I'm ever going to be fixed. But more than to be able to be a dad and someday be a grandfather, and I'm not completely convinced that I want to move back to where I was. The employer that I had before knew of my struggles, and they were very supportive of my rehab. In fact, the employer actually came to court with me here when I was here last time. He drove all the way up here, and there's such a great group of folks there. So, the only reason why I would entertain going there would be to work for him, because he's such a great guy, and he knows me, he knows my predicament. As far as my anchor, my sponsor being my anchor there, before I left that particular area, I had a really good sponsor. Chris Haberman was sponsoring me in that area, and he was really a great gentleman as well. And so I wouldn't entertain the idea of returning somewhere that I would be afraid to return to because of the possibility of picking up where I left off. Believe me, my sobriety and my well-standing are of utmost importance to me, and I would not put myself in an area where I felt like that wasn't going to happen. You know, if I didn't feel like, if I had a bad feeling about returning there, not go there. But it's one of many options right now. I haven't really made a decision yet as to whether I'm really going to go there or not. I used to actually live here in Northern California. I lived in Yuba City for 15 years. And so Yuba City's kind of on the table too. I'm thinking about that. So I really haven't made a decision where I'm going to go. But first and foremost, I'm going to live in an environment where, you know, where I can be close to my kids, and wherever I go, my recovery goes with me. So,
It's just always interesting when people want to create closeness geographically, they create distance in the mind. And you kept referring to this is the disease of the mind. So I want to only address it in the part of mind where it lives. And in the part where it lives in the mind, it tells you stories,
right,
right?
sure.
And in this instance, it's telling the story that I will have a better relationship if I move it closer. And that may be true at some point or even now. But at the same time, you are having that now. I'm pointing you right now. You are having that relationship right now. And it is already at a more developed stage than what it was. And there's a cultivation period for this so that you can calibrate your mind to that reality and not give in to the mind sending you on that hunt again. It's a chasing effect. And you know what that feels like, you see. You know what it feels like. And so I just want to point you to it. And I love the fact that you have that sensitivity, because I can feel that you have that sensitivity, that you know what I speak of. So like I said, you know, I just see a very pointed deal about where you are aware about the conversation in mind, and then the reality of what is so stark and so powerful that I would be remiss if I didn't point that to you. So I just felt more compelled to say that. So once again, thank you.
Thank you. That's a very clear insight.
Member Alviso,
No questions.
do any members have any further questions they wish to ask? Mr. Tan, did you have any further questions?
I have one follow-up, Your Honor.
You may.
Mr. Walker, if you were to be granted a probationary license with a, let's say, a 10-year probation with biological fluid testing and all the other terms and conditions and restrictions in practice, you do understand that there would be cost involved with that probationary license,
Yes.
and this cost could be prohibitive. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And for the sake of your family, you're willing to still undergo that probationary license, assuming it were 10 years and with maximum cost in terms of biological fluid testing. You're fine with that?
Yes.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. It's now time for summing up. Mr. Tan, did you want to make a summing up?
Yes, Your Honor. The best indicator for future action is past behavior observed over a long period of time. In this case, we know, and it's fairly open and obvious for everyone to see, that Mr. Walker has had, for a long period of time, issues with alcohol and drugs. If the board were to take a risk on Mr. Walker, obviously, a probationary license of a very, very lengthy time would be appropriate. Biological fluid testing would be appropriate. Restrictions on practice, a monitor, a lot of restrictions should be allotted if the board were to take a chance on Mr. Walker. Because in the final analysis, that's where we are. The facts are obvious. If the board grants this petition, you will be taking a risk on Mr. Walker. You will be taking a risk. You will be taking the public, or putting the public at risk. It'll be like throwing dice. Because we know Mr. Walker has had epiphanies before. When he was discovered by his employer to have issues with Percocet and Valium, he was put on a 10-day detox program. Prior to that, he was sober for 5 years, from 89 to 1993. The point is, the board will be taking a risk. That risk can be mitigated with the conditions in terms of biological fluid testing over 10 years. Then we know for sure that Mr. Walker will be in this program, the AA program, or any other therapy, psychotherapy that the board deems appropriate to mitigate that risk. But in the final analysis, it's still a risk. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Walker, did you want to make a final summing up?
I just wanted to thank everybody for being here and for your questions and for your insight. And I hope that you will, take the things that I've said into consideration, and that you will consider me for licensure again. And thank you.
Thank you. All right, the board will be going into deliberations in closed session. As I explained earlier to our previous petitioner, you will not be getting a decision today. It will be coming sometime in the future. Thank you so much. The matter has been submitted, and we are off the record. Our court reporter, once again, will give you a document that will show if you ever want to purchase a transcript of this hearing.
Okay.
Do you want to?
Thank you, Judge Brandt. At this time, we'll move into closed session to deliberate. We will then recess for lunch and return at 2 p.m. Thank you.